Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1130 for October 12th, 2025. Coming up in a few minutes.
We're a big college basketball state, a big horse racing state, so I don't get a lot of the hockey references that Minister Carney keeps using, but we sure know what it means to be in the penalty box.
This week, the Kentucky Distillers Association released its annual production report showing bourbon inventories at an all-time high at a time when sales are down. That's causing some sleepless nights in bourbon country. We'll look at the numbers and the outlook with KDA President Gregory on this week's WhiskyCast In-Depth. In the What I'm Tasting This Week department, I'll look at the latest release from Compass Box, Brûlée Royale, and we'll have Behind the Label and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast. Crafted with time, shaped by nature, perfected by generations. From Yamazaki to Hibiki to Hakushu, every drop of House of Suntory whiskey is a reflection of where it comes from. House of Suntory, this is Japanese whiskey.
Enjoy responsibly. Suntory Whiskey Single Malt and Blended Japanese Whiskey. 43% alcohol by volume. Copyright 2025 Suntory Global Spirits Import Company, Chicago, Illinois.
Gifting season's right around the corner. Luckily, you don't have to overthink this one. Dewar's 12-year-old, finished in first fill, unrinsed bourbon casks. It's the kind of gift that makes you look good while making them feel special. Stick around. I'll explain.
Let's get started with the week's news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. 2024 was a record year for U.S. spirits exports. 2025 is turning out to be anything but. A new report from the Distilled Spirits Council shows exports fell 9% during the second quarter of this year, and it's not just Canada. Exports to the European Union were down 12%, and the EU accounted for half of all U.S. spirits exports last year. Exports to the UK were off by 29%, and Japan was down by 23%. And then there's Canada, where all but two provinces are still boycotting American whiskeys and other spirits. Exports fell 85% during the quarter. Even though Canada removed its retaliatory tariffs on spirits last month, Canada remains the only key trading partner to retaliate against U.S. spirits. DISCA CEO Chris Swanger called the results troubling, since international markets are becoming more important to American whiskey producers, facing slower sales at home. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer met with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi this week in Mumbai, and Scotch Whisky Association leaders were part of the delegation. The free trade deal the two signed in July reduces India's tariff on imported whiskey from 150% to 75% now, with more reductions in future years. SWA leaders say the Indian market could grow to £1 billion a year and create 1,000 new jobs in Scotland. Turning to Canada now, Ontario Premier Doug Ford is looking at more provincial liquor boycotts with a specific eye toward Diageo. The drinks giant plans to close its Crown Royal bottling plant in Amherstburg, Ontario in February, and Ford says the Liquor Control Board of Ontario will pull Crown Royal off its shelves, quote, as soon as the last person leaves that plant. The LCBO is the largest purchaser of alcohol in the world, and Ford says Diageo is putting its biggest customer at risk over a plan that might save $8 million a year in wages. Ford is also threatening to pull Diageo's Smirnoff vodka off the shelves, too. Meanwhile, New Brunswick's provincial liquor monopoly is preparing for a long boycott of American whiskeys. It's selling off $3.5 million worth of inventory that's been in storage since the boycott began in March. ANBL is selling the American whiskeys, wines, and other spirits at its warehouse location in Salisbury, New Brunswick. The products have been available to the board's agency stores and local bars all along, but the agency's chief says demand has been weak. A federal bankruptcy judge has rejected Stoli Group USA's bid to pay off its debts with bourbon. The distiller has $78 million in debt and wanted to cover it with 35,000 barrels of maturing whiskey. However, the judge said bulk bourbon prices have collapsed and that he has too many doubts about the value of Stoley's Kentucky Owl Bourbon. We had a couple of annual releases unveiled this week. Buffalo Trace released this year's antique collection, including the new Colonel E.H. Taylor Bottled in Bond Bourbon. It's the 25th year for the antique collection, and the Taylor Bourbon joins the George T. Stagg, Eagle Rare 17, and William LaRue Weller bourbons, along with the 18-year-old Sazerac Rye and the Thomas H. Handy Sazerac Rye whiskey. Each one is officially priced at $149.99 a bottle. Diageo also debuted its annual special releases collection of 8 whiskeys, including 12-year-old Lagavulin and Oban malts, and an unusual 8-year-old single-grain rye whiskey distilled at Teaninich Distillery. Master blender Dr. Stuart Morrison created this year's Horizons Unbound collection, which also includes a 14-year-old Talisker, matured in volcanic rock toasted American oak barrels. No word on pricing. Malts from Gordon and MacPhail's The Cairn Distillery are still a few years away, but we're getting a preview now with the Cairn 57 series of blended malt Scotch whiskies using Gordon and MacPhail's extensive inventory of casks. Whiskey maker Stuart Urquhart crafted the whiskies to match the projected taste profile of the Cairn's single malt. There are 12, 18, 25, 30, 40, 57, and even a 70-year-old blended malt in the portfolio. That 70-year-old is the oldest blended malt ever bottled. Pricing starts at £39.99 for the no-age statement Cairn Vision. The Glenturret has unveiled this year's releases. The range includes the no-age statement Triple Wood single malt, along with 12, 15, and 25-year-old editions. There are also 7 and 10-year-old peated expressions. Earlier this year, we reported on the Glenturret's plan to phase out production of peated whiskey, but the distillery still has years of inventory to work with. Johnnie Walker is out with this year's limited edition Diwali Blue Label. The bottle features a design by Indian couturier Rahul Mishra and is designed for gifting during India's festive period. It's priced at £214.95 through hard-to-find whiskey. Outlander star Sam Heughan told us 2 years ago he had a dream of having his own whiskey distillery, and now he has one. Heughan and his investors bought the Crafty Distillery in Scotland, which had been producing gin and vodka for Heughan's The Sassenach brand. He's renamed it the Galloway Distillery and plans to expand it and start making whiskey there as well. Finally, the Distillers' one-of-one auction was held Friday at Hopetoun House near Edinburgh, Scotland. 39 one-of-a-kind whiskies and experiences went on the block and raised £2.8 million for the Distillers' charity Youth Action Fund. The 3 biennial auctions so far have raised $6.6 million. The next auction will be held in the fall of 2027. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Let's check the calendar now and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. Tickets go on sale Tuesday for this year's New Brunswick Spirits Festival in Fredericton. The festival starts November 18th and runs through the 22nd. Belfast's Titanic Distillers is hosting the team from Saison Dining for a whiskey dinner this Friday night, October 17th. The American Whiskey Show is in Melbourne, Australia on Saturday, and that same day is Sagamore Spirit Distillery's final Whiskey on the Waterfront party of the year in Baltimore, Maryland. The Brandy Library in New York City has a Great Bourbon's Spirit School class coming up on the 25th. November 1st brings us the Top Shelf Whiskey Show in Brisbane, Australia, and the Whiskey Social in Toronto, Ontario. Finally, Whiskey Fest New York is on November 14th. Tickets are still available. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
Hey again, it's Gabriel from Jewers. Every holiday has that moment when the food's done and the talking, laughing, and sipping begins. That's where the perfect gift shows up. Dewar's 12-year-old. Finished in first fill, unrinsed bourbon casks, and crafted by 6-time Master Blender of the Year, Stephanie McLeod. It's the highest rated 12-year blended scotch out there. A gift that speaks for itself. Because holidays aren't about the gifts we keep, they're about the ones we share. Please enjoy responsibly. Copyright 2025, Dewar's is a trademark. Imported by John Dewar & Sons Company, Coral Gables, Florida. Blended Scotch whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Glendalough Irish Whiskey. Kentucky's distillers are either in a boom or a bust period. In short, they're caught between the glass being half empty or half full. Clichés aside, the Kentucky Distillers Association released 2024's year-end production report this week. State Treasury Department records show the Commonwealth's distillers produced 3.2 million barrels of whiskey during 2024. That's a new record high since record-keeping began in the 1970s. There are also 16.1 million barrels of bourbon maturing in Kentucky's rickhouses, also a new record. That production record will not be challenged this year, as many distilleries have cut back on production out of fears of a whiskey glut. I talked with KDA President Eric Gregory about this year's data and what it means for the industry. So is the glass half empty or half full?
Both. And I'm not trying to dodge your question. Having 16.1 million barrels of bourbon and 17.1 million barrels when you count other spirits aging in Kentucky is a bit of a double-edged sword. First of all, it's glass half full when you look that we've got more distillers in Kentucky than ever before, now counting 127. We've got several more on the way, which is creating jobs and investment. We're in 49 of Kentucky's 120 counties, the most we've ever been in before. And when you look at the fact that a lot of the barrels, in fact, most of the barrels that are aging right now won't be dumped and bottled until, 2030 and beyond, we're poised, to be able to meet any demand that comes our way then. Now, glass half empty, there's a lot of things happening in the industry right now that are giving people pause. We've got the uncertainty over tariffs and the global markets. We've got changing generational habits in drinking. We've got inflation and the competition for leisure dollars. And we've got everything from weight loss drugs, that curb alcohol to, a lot of people just not drinking anymore. And at that point, you start saying, okay, we've got a lot of whiskey on hand that's being taxed, every year it ages. We're going to have to right-size inventory.
How do you do that?
Well, there have been stories already this year, just one a couple of weeks ago, I think, for using some of the TTB numbers, that production's down to record levels not seen in 5 or 6 or 7 years, right? So I think you're going to see a lot of the distilleries, and you already are seeing distilleries pulling back on production, until we can hopefully, knock on wood, get through some of these headwinds, get some of these trade disputes resolved, and get us back in markets that we've been growing for more than a decade now.
I noticed in the news release that you normally mention the number of barrels that were produced last year, and you didn't do that this year. Is that because production was down?
Well, it'd be an old number if it was, because we, again, the new information that's out shows production is down. So I don't know, the previous year was 3.2 million. I guarantee it's going to be down less than that this year. So with the new information coming out, I just didn't see a need to put it in there. Everybody knows production's down.
What are your members telling you?
I think they're all, cautiously optimistic. We keep saying that now, for a few years when these trade disputes are going on. You've got, people looking for the good in everything right now. You got some distilleries that are, having tough times, and the bigger distilleries that have the capital and have the barrel inventories, they're going to be able to ride this out, a lot easier than some of the smaller craft distilleries or even some of the medium-sized distilleries. I think tourism is helping keep the doors open in a lot of places right now. And thankfully, we've been fortunate to pass a bunch of laws in the last few years that are really helping these smaller craft distilleries get by that maybe some other states don't. One of the best things that we did a couple of years ago was pass limited self-distribution for craft distilleries. So where they can go out now and distribute their own products up to 5,000 gallons a year. And I've had craft distilleries say, man, that has saved me. I couldn't get in these, companies, these retail stores. Now that I'm acting as my own brand person, I'm in those stores, and hopefully I can continue growing my brand myself. That'll make me attractive enough in years to get back with a wholesaler and expand even more. So, again, it's like we said, I think in the press release, it's a mixed bag. It all depends on your vulnerability in the global market right now, and your brands, how successful in brand building you've been, and how if you're taking advantage of some of the other tools that we've been able to provide.
A couple of the Canadian provinces, Alberta and Saskatchewan, have brought back American whiskeys to their
God bless them.
Are you having any luck persuading Canada's trade ministers to relax those embargoes?
Not directly. We keep on, spreading our message through our congressional delegation and our friends in the administration that, this would be a good step for them in trade negotiations. They eliminated the 25% tariff on us for anything that was still covered under the USMCA. So, that was a good first step, we believe. But if you're not back on the shelf, who cares about a tariff? Because, you're not able to sell anything at that point. We did host the trade minister from Alberta down here a few weeks ago, and we thanked him profusely for doing that. We hadn't had a chance to talk to our friends in Saskatchewan, but I understand Prime Minister Carney's has been meeting at the White House this week, right?
Yeah.
So I hope this comes up. We've certainly been in the ear of the administration enough that they know that Canada is our largest export country, and with the news this week out of Discus that we're down 85% in exports, I'm assuming the other 15% is probably Alberta and Saskatchewan. That's put a dent in all of our sales. I don't, I'm watching a lot more CBC these days than I ever expected. I've got them on my favorites list now. And so I watch a lot of their press conferences, and us, Mark, we've got hockey down here, but we're not a big hockey state, right? I mean, hell, we're not even a big football state right now. You're Indiana, your state is. But we're a big college basketball state, a big horse racing state. So I don't get a lot of the hockey references that Minister Carney keeps using. But we sure know what it means to be in the penalty box these days. So let's get us back on the ice. Literally, let's get us back on the ice.
Well said. What about the distilleries that we've seen in recent weeks that are going under? We've talked about Garrett County, Luca Mariano, a couple of these other small ones. So is this a canary in the coal mine situation?
I don't think so. And I don't know much about Luca. They weren't a member, and we've had very limited conversations with them. Garrett County, they got in. Luca and Garrett County both, I think, kind of got in as things were starting to tighten up. Is that the best word to use, I guess? There's a lot of contract distilleries that have gotten on board here in the past few years, and some of them have been incredibly successful, and some of them still are very successful. But I think that's kind of, shifted that market a little bit. And I think that definitely Garrett County, I think they got caught up in a little bit of that and all this competition for contracts. Again, I don't know much about Luca. I don't know what they were doing from a contract basis or things like that. So I really can't comment. We've had a great working relationship with Shashi and the folks that owned Garrett County. And, we keep in touch with the receiver just to check on things and how they're going. And they seem pretty confident that they're going to get that place turned around and probably sold by the end of the year.
Let's talk about the barrel tax, your annual bugaboo. 17 million barrels getting taxed every year on property taxes. How bad is it this year?
$75 million. That's a 163% increase in the last 5 years alone. 5 years ago, we were about $25 million. And so we've tripled that. We warned this was going to come, and we warned that we would start seeing, 50, 75, $100 million in barrel taxes if something wasn't done. Something's been done. We just have a 20-year phase out, so we won't see any relief from that until next year. But $75 million at a time when we can least afford it for a lot of distilleries is a problem. So I don't know what we can do about it at this point. I mean, we're making people, especially our legislators, aware that, anything we can do to help the industry again. We've been looking at RTD legislation the past few years to try to get some tax parity on that. We'd love to expand satellite tasting rooms. Those have been a great success, but we're only limited to one. We want to, there are other ways I think that we can get some regulatory relief and help when we're paying that much in barrel taxes, and we're the only place in the world that pays that much in barrel taxes. It's kind of adding insult to injury. We've been saying since 2018, I know you and I have talked about it, with these trade disputes, that whiskey's got to go somewhere, right? It may not be going to the EU, it may not be going to Canada, but it's got to go somewhere. Well, guess what? It's staying here. And it's staying here and being taxed at high levels. So, $75 million. And a $10 billion assessment that's up about 25% from last year. So, that's a problem.
What can the legislature do since you've already got this phase-out bill that comes into effect starting next year?
Well, on the tax standpoint, I don't think that's something we want to open up. We made a compromise with the local communities and schools and fire departments and the legislators, that we would accept a long-term phase-out to help, allow communities time to diversify their tax base and kind of, wean themselves off, the barrel tax, because we had some communities that were balancing their budgets on 25, 30% just barrel taxes. And we warned that that's just bad fiscal policy, because you have an industry like ours. I think we said this 2 years ago. You have an industry like ours that is subject to external pressures that sometimes we don't have control of. Well, guess what? We're here, and next year with production being down, I don't think we're going to be at 17.1 million barrels. And I hope we're not going to be at $75 million. So, these communities are going to start seeing some of that money go down. I really hope they're socking some of that away and, again, using it to diversify their tax base, so they're not just reliant on a single industry to help prop up their budget. And we've been going around and meeting with the judge executives and making sure they understand the state of the industry, the good and the bad, the pros and the cons, like we talked about in today's press release, the tax burden that we're facing, and, just giving you a heads up what's going on. But from what the legislature could do, again, I think if they can help us with some of these regulatory needs to help our members get through this on a short-term basis, so we can get over the hump next few years. Hopefully this is something cyclical and not structural. That seems to be the big conversation these days. Then, hang on tight, get us through the challenge we've got right now, and we'll come out stronger.
Is now a good time to open a distillery?
I think it depends on what kind of distillery it is, right? If you're going to, let me put it this way. Now's a good time to invest. That's for sure. We don't talk about pricing much at KDA because we can't. That would, be an antitrust thing. But we hear all sorts of barrels going for prices that I'm shocked that they're going for some low prices. So I would say if you're going to invest in Kentucky bourbon, now's a good time. Opening distillery, I think it's all going to depend on your business model. Are you looking to be just a great craft distillery and you're wanting to get into tourism and be a good regional drink of choice for people? Yeah, we've got a bunch of those opening, including one in my hometown of Henderson that, they've already got juice that's being bottled by their friends in Muhlenberg County and I've tried it, and it's really good. And I think they're going to make well. I think they're going to have fun because they're sitting right on the riverfront in Henderson with all those river cruise, those big paddle wheel boats coming in. So I think they're going to do fine. The old joke, Max Shapiro always reminds me of this. The old joke is, how do you make a small fortune in the distilling industry? Start with a large one, right? Yeah. I think if you are going to open a distillery right now, just, make sure you do your homework, read the room, see if this is something that you need to, wait for a little bit to see how the tariff situation, the trade goes. If it's something you want to start planning now and, putting back some whiskey at one of the other distilleries or something like that, but I think it all just depends on your business model. And I think you have to make sure you're going to be in it for the long term. I think the days of people getting into business thinking they're going to triple their profits overnight or something like that, I don't think that's here anymore. But if you understand that you're going to open a distillery or you're going to get in the contract game and buying barrels, that over the next 10 years or 15 years, you may have a 20% profit. That's still really good, So do your homework, give us a call. We're always happy to talk about things like that. And the fact that we still have distilleries open in Kentucky, I think it's a positive sign.
What keeps you awake at night?
Tariffs. Yeah. Period. 30 end. Tariffs. Most of the global growth in the past 10 to 15 years has been or most of the growth into Kentucky has been geared towards the global needs. And this, you can't just drop into a country and immediately switch what people were drinking to Kentucky bourbon, right? I mean, they've grown up with Scotch or Irish whiskey or Canadian whiskey. It takes years of brand building. I mean, some people say it takes at least 10 years of brand building. So when you look at the EU and the UK in particular, distilleries spent millions of dollars brand building over there to try to convince people to switch to Kentucky bourbon. And we were having success. Between 2007 and 2018, when the first tariffs hit, our exports to the UK and the EU grew by 152%. And now we've lost a little bit of that momentum and we're down 20%. And, with the 10% tariff on Scotch coming in, that's having an effect on the used barrel market right now. We send about $300 to $400 million a year in used barrels over to Scotland. That's starting to fall. The EU, people are concerned that 50% tariff may come back in March. So they're worried about how am I going to have sales over there anymore? Canada is a completely different animal. We're off the shelves completely. And there's a lot of animosity over right now for all American products, not just bourbon, but other things as well. So how do we win back those consumers at some point? So, that's tariffs, trade relations. We've got to find some way to get back to normal of the reciprocal tariff-free trade where we were before as a global spirits market, because we're all part of the big whiskey family, and what's good for one of us is good for the other. I firmly believe that. Tariffs. You notice I didn't say UK football. I said tariffs. Or my Reds. Man, they drugged me in. I was so excited for them to get in the playoffs. I bought the shirt the night they got it. They said Reds in October. Damn, they're not out of the playoffs and I ain't got my shirt yet. So
you jinxed them.
I did. I probably did. But that's a good young team. We'll be with them next year.
It's okay, Eric. My Phillies crashed and burned out of the playoffs, too. Thanks to Kentucky Distillers Association President Eric Gregory for joining us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Glendalough Irish Whiskey.
Our story begins in the wilds of County Wicklow, the Garden of Ireland, a place where nature moves slowly and meaningfully. Some whiskies blend in. Glendalough Double Barrel stands apart. I'm Rowdy Rooney, head distiller here at Glendalough, and I personally oversee our whiskey making process from start to finish. We do things slowly and we do them right. We start with a smooth single grain Irish whiskey. We age it in flame charred American oak for soft vanilla and a honeyed depth. Then we finish it in Oloroso casks from a small bodega in Spain. Casks we season and ship ourselves to make sure the wood is still alive with character when it arrives. That kind of care gives Glendalough Double Barrel its rich layers of dried fruit, warm spice and signature smoothness. This is a whisky at its own pace, and it's worth every second. This is Glendalough Double Barrel, crafted to stand apart.
Let's start off the What I'm Tasting This Week department with the new Sentinel of the Desert Bourbon from Whiskey Del Bach. It's finished with mesquite staves and bottled at 46% ABV. The nose has caramel, a soft touch of mesquite, honey, brown sugar, and vanilla. The taste has notes of mesquite seasoning, oak tannins, sour apples, honey, and vanilla. The finish is long and woody, and I'm scoring Whiskey Del Bach's Sentinel of the Desert Bourbon a 90. Next up, let's look at the latest Legacy Series release from Torreveg Distillery on the Isle of Skye. Sound of Sleet is bottled at 46% ABV, and the nose has touches of peat smoke, brine, heather, honey, and vanilla. The taste has a nice balance of peat smoke and lemon pepper spice, along with notes of brine, heather, and honey, while the finish is long, tart, and peppery. I'm scoring the Torreveg Sound of Sleet a 92. And finally, let's look at the new Brûlée Royale from Compass Box. It's a blended malt bottled at 49% ABV, and the nose has, as you might expect from the name, creme brulee, along with vanilla pods, pear candies, and a hint of butterscotch. The taste has notes of honey, peach pie, a nice malty touch of barley sugar, lemon custard, and a hint of apples. The finish is long with a lingering maltiness and a touch of peach pie crust. Compass Box just keeps knocking it out of the park. I'm scoring Brûlée Royale a 94. I'll be adding these whiskeys to our searchable list of nearly 3,900 whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at whiskycast.com. Japanese whiskey began with Shinjiro Tori's vision to reflect the true nature and spirit of Japan. The House of Suntory was founded on these principles, guided by generations of craftsmanship that have transformed time, nature, and precision into something greater than the sum of its parts. Pure waters from the mountains of Hakushu, Mizunara oak shaped by decades of patience, a blending philosophy rooted in harmony. These aren't just techniques, they're a way of thinking, a quiet pursuit of balance and depth. From the layered complexity of Yamazaki to the crisp vibrancy of Hakushu and the elegant artistry of Hibiki, every whiskey is a reflection of where it comes from and the hands that shape it. House of Suntory. This is Japanese whiskey.
Enjoy responsibly. Suntory Whiskey Single Malt and Blended Japanese Whiskey. 43% alcohol by volume. Copyright 2025 Suntory Global Spirits Import Company, Chicago, Illinois.
Let's open up the inbox now and see what people are talking about this week in our community segment. Tyrone Cote of Halifax, Nova Scotia posted this comment in the app on last week's interview with Stephen Rankin of Gordon and MacPhail. Mark, I'm listening to your interview with Stephen Rankin and the tasting of the 1940 Glenlivet. I thought I'd share my tasting notes. Initially, I had hints of envy that on further contemplation turned vibrant green. Next came waves of FOMO with an everlasting feeling of emptiness. In all seriousness, it was great to hear Stephen again. It took me back to tastings in the G&M boardroom as we sampled from their liquid library. We also had this comment from Hugo Dart in Brazil. Great interview, even if most of us will never have a chance to try something like the 85-year-old. It was great to hear Stephen Rankin provide a complete historical perspective on it. That sort of thing can really help us appreciate the artistry and legacy in whiskey making. And Triple H added this comment, a 40-year-old whiskey is the oldest whiskey I've ever tried. That doesn't make it the best. That honor goes to Middleton Dergelac, first release. I'm opening that bottle when I retire next spring. And finally, Law School Drunk posted this comment, if anyone read the 25 Years of Whiskey review in the most recent edition of Whiskey Advocate, how did they not mention the death of Michael Jackson in 2007? Not worthy of mention, or is my bewilderment correct? Well, I haven't read the review in question, but if we were doing a similar review on 20 Years of WhiskyCast, Michael's passing would certainly be on the list. If there's something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, download the free WhiskyCast community app from your app store and join the conversation. You can also find us on social media. Look for WhiskyCast on X, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook, and our email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. It turns out Shackleton's whiskey isn't the only whiskey that spent time in the ice of Antarctica. There's an Argentinian single malt that spent its final 3 years of maturation at an Argentine research station on Seymour Island. The whiskey comes from La Alazana Distillery and was first matured there for 5 years in virgin oak before being transferred into ex-bourbon barrels and being sent to Antarctica. It underwent temperature extremes ranging from 35 below Celsius to 10 degrees Celsius, and the casks developed a frost coating on the outside. It's believed the extreme cold allowed for extraction and oxidation, but kept the ethanol from evaporating. It's being bottled this week for Cask World's limited edition 8 Continent series, which will be released next year and includes whiskeys from India, South Africa, Brazil, Canada, and Wales. If there's something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us, download the free WhiskyCast community app from your app store, or find us on social media. We're on Blue Sky, X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, and our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
Food's gone, stories are flying, and everyone's laughing a little too loud. That's when Dewar's 12-year-old feels right at home. Enjoy the holidays from your friends at Dewar's.
Crafted with time, shaped by nature, perfected by generations. From Yamazaki to Hibiki to Hakushu, every drop of House of Suntory whiskey is a reflection of where it comes from. House of Suntory, this is Japanese whiskey.
Enjoy responsibly. Suntory Whiskey Single Malt and Blended Japanese Whiskey. 43% alcohol by volume. Copyright 2025 Suntory Global Spirits Import Company, Chicago, Illinois.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2025, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.